Welcome, everyone, to the Rosie and Bill Show. Our guest this week is known for his quick wit, impeccable timing, and being flat out funny from start to finish every time he takes the stage. Please welcome to the show a world-class comedian and a world-class guy, Tony Deyo. Tony, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man.
You got
That's
it,
a
Tony.
fantastic introduction. I like that.
Well, thank you. You deserve it. You earned it, and I'm just trying to do right by you. Appreciate you coming on the show, Tony. Been looking forward to this since January 9th when you just crushed it at Soul Joel's. Had a chance to see you there and catch up with you a little bit afterwards, which was great. And during that show, as well as in your Dry Bar special, which is phenomenal, and folks, if you haven't seen it yet, you got to check it out. Over 1 million views last time I saw, which is amazing.
Yeah, can you believe that? Over 1 million views.
Yeah, yeah, and counting. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, no, and it's. I'll tell you what, folks, if you haven't seen it, you've got to see it. Like I said, flat out funny, start to finish. It's phenomenal. And during that show, as well as at Soul Joel's, you talk about your background. And that's kind of where I'd like to kick things off, Tony. I mean,
Sure.
before comedy, you were involved in some other things. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of turn the clock back and let's go back to, let's say, your childhood. What was life like for young Tony growing up?
Young Tony grew up in kind of rural Virginia, and I went to college in Virginia as well. I got a music education degree. I loved marching band in high school and just wanted to keep playing the drums. So I went and got a music degree, and then I went out to Las Vegas and I got a master's degree in percussion performance.
Wow.
And then I moved to Texas and started teaching music there, and I played in a couple of symphonies in Texas, and um, that was right about the time I started doing stand up is when I lived in Austin, Texas. And it was a kind of the same time I was teaching, and I knew I had to do one or the other probably. So I retired from teaching after 3 long years and decided to pursue stand up.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we also appreciate our first and longest running sponsor of the show, Tom and his team of insurance professionals at the Malin Agency. If world-class customer service and doing business with someone you can trust is important to you, give Tom and his team a call today for all your insurance needs. How did you get involved in stand-up in the first place? Because I'm sure you were probably pretty busy with what you were doing.
I was, but I had loved stand up since I was a kid,
Hmm.
and I saw that the like local comedy club, it was Cap City Comedy Club. They were teaching a class there,
Okay.
and I took the class, and the probably the hardest um, thing for me was going to be getting on stage and just telling jokes. I don't think I was ever going to do it on my own. So what the class did for me was it gave me a goal at the end of the class. Everyone had to get up and do their 5 minutes.
Hmm.
So that was the first time that I performed, and I loved it. And I got some laughs, and you know how that is. You get addicted to those laughs, and here we are, 22 years later.
That's amazing. Well, I'll tell you, I just went through taking the class at Soul Joel's myself, so I'm very familiar with that 5 minutes. Also, now very familiar with how difficult it is coming
Yeah,
up with a quality 5 minutes, man.
5 minutes is a long time when you expect people to be laughing all the way through it.
Wow, it really is. But that's really interesting to hear how you got into it. So was there, I mean, it's a pretty bold move going from teaching into comedy. Was there any particular moment or event where like the light bulb went off and you just had an epiphany or something? Was it anything in particular that caused you to make the leap?
Um, it was just something I I didn't want to look back and regret not trying it.
Mm,
Um, I've always kind of had this mindset of I I don't mind failing, you know, but to me, regret is so much worse than failing, you know. I've tried to learn to play the guitar and I'm not good at it. And so I'm okay with that. You know, it's not what I was meant to do. But if I had never tried it, I would have looked back one day and go, maybe I would have been a good guitar player.
mm.
Um, Now I know I wouldn't have been. But
Right.
uh, comedy was the same way for me. I just didn't want to look back and think, what would have happened? I loved comedy. What would have happened if I tried it? You know, so I knew the odds starting out. They're
Mm,
just astronomical of being a success in this business. So many things have to go your way, besides working hard and being funny. Like that's all bare minimum. And then you have to get lucky and have a lot of things kind of just fall your way. So I knew the odds going into it weren't great, but I did want to try. And thankfully, things have kind of gone my way a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's great to hear that you had the courage and the wherewithal to do it because I know, I look back at when I was done with college and there were some things that I wanted to do, but I kind of went the corporate route and did what other people wanted more so than what I wanted to do for a few decades. But now
Right.
circled back and,
Yeah, come back
better
around.
late than never. But I just have so much respect for someone like yourself who you had that desire to do it. You didn't want to have those regrets because you're right. That those regrets can be a lot harder to deal with than maybe trying and failing because you'll
Right.
never
Sure.
know.
Way, way harder than trying and failing.
Yeah. Now, when you started in those first few years when you were trying to get your legs under you as a comic, were there any particular lessons that you learned early on that you were able to take with you?
The Probably the one that has helped me the most, and I when I started, I used to just consume as much uh, Seinfeld as I could, and
Hmm.
not necessarily his stand up, but what he would say about being a comedian. And I kind of patterned my work ethic after his. And he talked about, how if you want this to be your job, you have to treat it as a job. And I think that's where probably at least half of the people that fail at stand up is because they don't treat it as a job, so it doesn't become their job.
Hmm.
And I get up every day and I write every single day. I don't miss a day. That's just my rule. And it's so ingrained in me now, it uh, I can't even, like, even on Christmas, I sit down and I write for a little while. It's just what I do. And that has taken me so much farther than if I had decided I was going to sit down and write when I was feeling funny or when
Hmm.
I had a good idea. That's not it. You sit down and write, and if you don't have a new idea, you go back and look at something else you've written, and it can always be a little bit better. So if you feel like you're having writer's block, which I don't really believe in, uh, just sit down and try to make something else better.
Wow, and as you're saying that, Tony, I remember when I took the class, one of the books that was recommended to us was the Comedy Bible. Judy Carter, I believe, is the
Yep,
author.
that was my first book about comedy too.
Yeah, and in there, early in the book, she references Seinfeld, and I
Mhm.
believe it was every day, minimum of 20 minutes, you need to write. No
Yeah,
excuses, no exceptions.
right.
And you've
Yeah.
got to make that a priority. And so kudos to you for, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk every day, including Christmas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Plus, on Christmas, it gives you an excuse to ditch the family for 30 minutes or so.
Well, and you know what? I remember I just actually wrote this down the other day. It was on early Christmas morning one year when I realized that the three most beautiful words in the English language, when you have young children, where you've got to put toys together and things like that, the three
Yeah,
most beautiful words are no assembly required.
right.
So that was something that I jotted down at some point on a Christmas morning and, look back
Yep.
to it all these years later. Now, one thing I'm curious about is from everything I've seen, you have something in common with Greg Warren, Nate Bargatze, and several other comedians who, again, consistently funny start to finish, but also clean. Your material is considered clean. So
Yes.
does that present challenges first from a writing standpoint? Is it harder to write clean than it is if you're just maybe throwing in other stuff?
I don't think so, but it's also because I've done it for a long
Mm.
time. Um, it doesn't occur to me to be dirty. And I don't even know if I can nail down exactly why I made that choice. I mean, it's probably because, my heroes were Seinfeld and Brian Regan.
Mm.
Um, and, you watch those guys enough, you're like, well, I mean, if they can be clean, I can be clean.
Yeah.
And I wasn't always 100%. I heard Jim Gaffigan tell the story where he used to be 90% clean. And he's like, well, why am I 10% dirty and 90% clean? There's no reason for it. And that was like, once I'd heard that, I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's no reason for me to be almost completely clean and then not really. So, yeah,
Yeah, and I know I've had other people tell me that, there are some advantages too when you're a clean comic. You can get corporate gigs. There's other
yes,
things that you can do that maybe other people can't because
right.
people, that's not going to fly in certain scenarios.
Right. And it's also like I never get scared of an audience. Like I've known comedians and I've done shows we'd be doing a theater or something, uh, and you look out at the audience and there's kids there.
Mm.
And that doesn't bother me. Like they might not, you know, relate to everything I'm talking about, but I'm not going to say anything that they haven't heard. I'm not going to upset their parents. It doesn't, and I've been with comedians. They're like, nobody told me kids were going to be here. What am I going to do?
Oof.
So, yeah, when you work clean, like an audience doesn't really scare you. And I can also, it doesn't happen much anymore, but there were times when I used to do like bar shows and things like that where they kind of needed you to be rougher around the edges. I can become dirty with a flip of the switch. I just say the F word more.
Yeah.
But you can't go from being a dirty comic to a clean comic with the flip of a switch. It doesn't work that way. So,
Mm.
there's a lot of advantages and very little downside to being a clean comic.
Well, we talked a little bit, Tony, about the writing and the fact that you write every day. Is there a particular process? Is it observational? Like, is there a particular way that you go about it?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's kind of observational, but I don't know if that's I have a hard time describing myself as that because I feel like that's every comedian. We're
Yeah.
all trying to watch the world and see things around us. Very few of us are the Andy Kaufmans who are going to go out and sing the Mighty Mouse theme. And, we're all kind of observational comics. So that it covers too broad of a spectrum of comedy now. Um, but um, I kind of, I'm always like when you write every day, your brain's always in comedy mode.
Mm.
And, it's not so much that it takes up every thought of going through the day. But when I see something funny or something occurs to me, I'm like, I think that might be funny. I'll write it down. And then the next time I sit down to write, I'll try to come up with something with it. And, I'm still working on things I thought of a decade ago that I haven't been able to make work, but I still believe that it's funny. So I'm just waiting for my skills to sort of catch up with, what my brain and my instinct tells me is funny.
That's interesting that you say that because what I was going to ask you next was, and I think it's along those lines, is I've been really struck by how with many of the comedians I've had the pleasure of speaking with, how it varies, and that is, how long would you say it took you to find your voice as a comedian?
Um, I did, um, honestly, I feel like that's constantly evolving.
Hmm.
Because I would have, several years ago, I would have told you that, once I did Conan, I'm like, oh, I've found my voice. I'm funny. I'm consistently doing well. But if I go back and watch it, it's not that I don't think I'm funny. It's just that's not the comedian that I am anymore.
Hmm.
Um, those aren't jokes I would tell anymore. So I've evolved. I think my voice is constantly evolving, and I do think as a comedian, you have to do that because then you become, the old guy telling jokes that feel like they're from the 80s or
Hmm.
whatever. And, if you don't evolve with comedy, you'll get left behind.
Yeah, and that's actually that's an interesting point because I was also wondering if you look at the time you've been in the business now, 20 plus years, speaking of evolving, the business, at least from an outsider perspective, seems to have changed.
Yeah,
From your perspective, how has it changed and has it caused you or led to you evolving just because of those changes, in addition to,
yeah,
just kind of evolving as a professional yourself?
yeah. The business side of it evolves. I've benefited from some of that. Like, when I started comedy, if you wanted to get on a late show, the booker had to see you in a club somewhere.
Hmm.
Um, and then I was around when YouTube came about, and you could just email a clip to the segment producer for a late show. That's how I got on. It was just by sending a YouTube clip. So I benefited from that evolution of the business. I've benefited a little bit from social media. I got lucky and some videos kind of went viral a couple of years ago. So I have a fairly large Instagram following because of social media, and I don't like doing it. It's not my favorite part of the business, but if I don't, this business will leave me behind.
Yeah.
There's places that will book you because you have a big following. So there's always been a part of the game that you have to play that you don't want to. I wish I could just sit down, write jokes, an agent books me, and I go tell jokes. And I wish that was all there was to being a comedian, but it's not. It's never been that way. It's never going to be that way. It's always, and it's not just our job that, the UPS guy. There's probably part of his job he likes, and then there's
Yeah.
part of his job he doesn't like. And, it comes with every career. So
That's a
you,
great point. Yeah,
yeah.
and one of the things that I've has been kind of a consistent theme in talking with a lot of comedians, as well as singers and entertainers, especially when it comes to social media, is this need to keep cranking out content on a
Mhm.
daily basis. And I know for a lot of comedians, it means putting out shorts and reels, putting out those pieces so that hopefully you can attract some people with some of the shorter clips, and then they'll go and see some of your longer clips. Because if you put out the long one first, oh my God, it's 32 minutes. I don't have that kind of time. So it's
Right.
just really interesting hearing how I've had some folks on even recently where there's family members chopping up some of their old bits into pieces and just
Yeah.
spraying out content every day on
Yeah.
Instagram and Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah. I do feel like I kind of I was I won't say I was ahead of the curve, but I was kind of trying to get big on YouTube a long time ago. So I've been putting clips on YouTube for a long time. So I learned to edit video and I learned to edit audio and do all the things I needed to do so that, when Instagram came around and short reels and things, it wasn't outside of my wheelhouse.
Hmm.
I just had to slightly adjust what I was doing. And, I was good at filming myself and recording myself. So, a lot of those pieces were already there when this part of the business came around.
Hmm. Wow. Well, that's great. Well, like I said, I mean, and folks, I highly encourage you to visit Tony's socials and check out those clips. I talked earlier about the dry bar special, but there are so many shorter clips, longer clips, just all kinds of great stuff out there on the socials.
Whoever invented the phrase slept like a baby, they didn't have a baby. I don't think they'd ever even seen a baby. I think that phrase should be slept like an adult that doesn't have a baby. Because those were some good sleeping years.
Now, what I like to do is switch gears a little bit and talk about something that you and I talked about on January 9th, which was, if I remember correctly, the first of about 10 shows you were doing to get ready for your special. So, where
Yes.
do things stand with the special and what can you tell us about it?
I recorded it a couple weeks ago. It went very well. I did 3 shows in Washington, D.C. And I still have to go through the footage, and
Hmm.
that's going to be the hardest part for me is going back and watching myself and deciding what makes the final cut.
Wow.
But yeah, everything went well. There were good audiences, and I'm very happy with how it turned out.
And what are your plans once you get everything done and it's ready to go? What would be the next steps in terms of access and where people might be able to find? Is that still to be determined?
Um, yes, but there's about a 95% chance it's on YouTube. And then,
Okay.
I'll do exactly what we were just talking about, which is chop it up into, you know, uh, 30 or 40 small clips and put those out online. And so, the same system. Get people to watch the little clips and maybe they go see the big clips and then maybe they come out to see a show.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you, I think that, the good thing is no matter how you cut up your show, every clip is going to be great. So I think no matter which one they watch, they're going to want to watch the next one. So you've got that going for you. And I can say that from firsthand experience.
Well,
Now,
thank you.
you're welcome. So in addition to working on the special and doing what you just talked about, what else does the rest of 2025 look like for you?
Um, Getting the special out is the big one, and then honestly, just getting back out onto the road. I already have an idea of at least the kind of centerpiece of what the next special is going to be. I'm finally going to go back and talk about my music background and
Hmm.
all of those things. Um, so kind of starting to put those little puzzle pieces together and figure out how they all fit together. And then sometime probably in 2026, I'll go out and record another one.
Yeah, you just made me think of something, Tony, when you're talking about that and thinking about the time difference between the one you're working on now and the next one. What did it take to put together the special that you recorded? Like, what kind of effort is involved? I know there was those 10 shows or so where you're kind of preparing, but from writing and planning and what kind of, effort goes into that? It just sounds so monumental to put it all together.
It is a little bit, but it was also several years in the making because my last album came out in December of 2019, and then we kind of immediately went into the pandemic,
Hmm.
and I didn't write for a while or get on stage for a while, and then I kind of slowly started doing that again, and I'd finally just sort of collected, so much material. I was doing about an hour and 10 minutes on the road. And that's when I was like, all right, I need to go and record this and kind of start over again. Because, you also, I don't want to say I get tired of telling jokes, but especially when I have jokes about having a kid,
Hmm.
th th they're kind of time-based, based on his age. And
Oh
I'm like,
yeah,
well, I know.
sleep when the baby sleeps.
Yeah, exactly. I can't tell that joke anymore because he's 11. So, you got to get, as a parent, you got to get some of those jokes recorded and put behind you so that you can move on and, tell jokes about Little League.
No, that's a great point. And I'm actually, as you're saying some of these things, I'm kind of processing them as I'm thinking about some of the things I'm looking to do as well. This is all great points that you're making. Now, one thing that I'd be curious to know, given all that you've done, looking back over the years from when you made that move from teaching into stand up, all the way up to and including where you're at now, what would you say you're most proud of?
I am I am most proud of doing late night television, doing Conan and the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, because it was my introduction to stand up was seeing comedians on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. That's where I was introduced to stand up. That's where I fell in love with stand up, was watching
Mm.
guys on there. And so when I got into stand up, that was my goal. And I know it's not the goal now for people getting into stand up. Everything about that has changed. Even, I did mine 10 or 11 years ago. Even by then, it had changed to the point where it benefited me and my career a little bit. But, when Johnny was having comedians on, it changed their life.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
the next day, their calendar was booked out. They were making a ton of money. It doesn't do that anymore. But, when I got into stand up, to me was success, was telling jokes on late night TV. And I got to do that. And once I'd done that, I felt like everything after that was just kind of a bonus.
Well, that's interesting because my next question for you was going to be, and you just touched on it, is because I like to look back and I also like to look ahead. And so the question was going to be, what would success ultimately look like for you? Have you already been there?
I have been there because success to me was being able to make a living doing this. You know,
Mm.
the odds are one in what, 100,000 maybe, if you're lucky. So being able to do this as a career was success for me. And, we all want to be bigger and more famous and sell more tickets and do all those things.
Mm.
But to be able to wake up every morning and my job is to be a comedian, that's a that's all I ever wanted.
I- Tony, I can't think of a more applicable, appropriate definition of success. Get up every day and do what you love to do. I don't know
Yeah.
that it can get any better than that. So I have one last question for you, completely off topic from everything else we've talked about. And that is, what's the craziest thing that's ever happened when you've been performing on stage over the years?
I you know what? I don't know how crazy it is. Like, I'm not the type of comedian that attracts
I
a
was going to say, you're not going to
crazy
elicit
things are gonna
crazy.
happen audience. That's not really the world I live in. But I do remember this story came back to me when I was hanging out with a couple of comics last week, and we were telling the old road stories of being out. And I was somewhere in Ohio at a comedy club, and they were giving away a little kind of like half-size motorcycle,
Hmm.
and it was on stage and it was leaking gas. And so I'm trying to tell jokes and I'm getting fumes of this motorcycle leaking. And some guy just comes up on stage and hoists this motorcycle and walks away with it. And I don't know if he worked for the club or if he was a guy that was just trying to save me from passing out. But that was an odd moment on stage, was the motorcycle being removed.
Well, yeah, first it's leaking gas, and then
Yeah,
somebody just comes up and yeah,
it just
there's certain things you can't make up.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of them.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Tony, I'll tell you, it's been such a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me. I wish you nothing but the best with putting this special together. I can't wait to find out when it's going to be coming out and seeing it on YouTube. And I'll do my best to help make sure as many people as possible know when it's coming out. Also look forward to you coming back to the area, whether it's Soul Joel's or anywhere here in this greater Philadelphia area. Looking forward to coming out and seeing you again and having a chance to talk with you in person again. So thank you again so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You got it. And folks, thank you for watching. Couldn't do it without you. See you next time.
Put myself on a little bit of a diet, and here's what I learned. When you're trying to lose weight and you step on a scale, there's no such thing as too naked. I get birthday suit naked, that's step one. Then I take my contacts out. Blow my nose, trim my fingernails. Exhale as hard as I can. Then I get on that scale. I am trying to eat healthier. I don't recommend it. It's terrible. I've actually gotten to the point I can recognize a terrible healthy recipe as soon as I see it. You know, they'll be like, hey, make this healthy alternative to Snickers bars right in your own kitchen. Oh, man. I love Snickers. Let's see how they did it. In this recipe, we have replaced the chocolate that you love so much with pureed black beans. Instead of caramel nougat, we're using cantaloupe rinds and Elmer's glue.
This week's episode has been brought to you by Doherty & Company Insurance Services for all your business and personal insurance needs. Our friends at Tennis Addiction in Exton, PA. And the Malin Agency, where exceeding expectations is how they do business.